Hello, my name is Claudia Panisello. Thanks to the Athens Institute for Education and Research for the possibility of sharing my work. I have some publications, letters for an unknown mind, available in Amazon. I have published my thesis, and I have a YouTube channel. The female subject in Fortune Poetry of Ida Vitale. Introduction. Ida Vitale was born in 1923, and she lived her first decades of life in Uruguay that inaugurated the participation of women in some spheres of society. She belongs to the so-called Uruguayan generation of 45, according to Emil Rodriguez Monegal terminology. She won the Cervantes Prize in 2019. Methodology. Identification of the topic to investigate. I will prove that there is a transperception in the position of the women as a subject in the poetry. Transperception is a neologism created by the undersigned to express the displacement of perception both in the creation and the artistic work, and in the impact of the reception of a text that presents ruptures in the traditional aesthetic paradigms. What is meant by transperception is perception that is on the other side of perceptions, constituting a sensation on the other side of the sensations that can we not acquire, but the direct impression of something material. It occurs in a double level, the rational process of creation of the artistic word and the reception of the reading through the capture that implies a singular perception. Through transperceptions, the displacement in the constitution of the meaning in the artistic pole would generate the modification of the aesthetic pole and the reader through the discovery of new perceptions through the reading of the text. I divide the work for its better analysis in different levels, following the parameters of Lodman in structure of artistic text, textual level, lexical level, and intertextual semantic level, and also divided in freedom, being, and conquest. Fortune by Ida Vitale. For years to enjoy the mistake and its amendment, to have been able to speak, to walk freely, not exist mutilated, not to enter or yes in church, to read, to listen to music dear, to be in the night as being in the day, not being married in a business measured in goats, not to suffer governmental relatives or legal stunning, never parade anymore, and not admit words put in the blood iron filings, to discover for yourself another unforeseen being on the bridge of sight, being human and woman, neither more nor less. The topic of resistance is implicit in this poem. If we take into the account the etymological meaning of the word, it means that resistance consists of a conjunction of several factors, action, the ability to do it, opposition to what is established, the implicit violence, and surviving in the state, exerting a sustained force over that achieves the conviction of what the woman is versus what the other wants to the woman to be. This poetry does legitimize the ancient position of a woman as an object and seen from the outside. The lyric voice expresses herself as a subject opposed to the woman object. Judith Butler points out the relation between the subject and power and the permanent redefinition of one of the relation to the other, and affirms that the subject is totally political, perhaps the most political, to the point where it is affirmed that it is a prior of politic itself. Paratextual level. The title Fortune is a poem that from its title announces a good luck, a positive situation, Feminine identity, the female subject, and what it means to be a woman is a complex concept that has varied throughout history and has ancestral roots related about all to the motherhood and the division tax within the gender. Women have historically been in a situation of inferiority within to the men. Following Simone de Beauvoir in the second sex, the category of the other is an original consciousness itself. She points out that since the most primitive societies, there had been a duality between the concept of the same on the other. Subsequently, this quality is transferred to women. Women are not born, but rather made throughout the cultural garments that imprint adherence to the gender. Lexical level. The lexical selection of the infinitive starts out a non-personal formal verbs, and in the sense several divisions can be found in the poem. The infinitive to enjoy, to speak, to walk, to listen. Verbs in infinitive, but preceded by the adverb of negation, no, not to be married, not to parade, not to admit. To use of the infinitive, but known as a non-personal verb form. According to Manuel Seco, the simple infinitive has an imperfect meaning, that is to consider the action in its course as not finished, a singular hierarchy, enumeration, evocation of the verbs in infinitive sounds out, which generates the semantic association in relation of the female subject. Verbs in the infinitive to indicate a situation of freedom linked to the power of what can be done. That is a power to do, including a power of error, the recognition of herself as a human, with such basic and scared functions in a juxtaposed enumeration, being able to speak, walk freely, with verbs that go beyond an adjective sense and become in metaphors of the quality of freedoms. It is vitally important to mention the ability to speak, which implies expression of being intellectual consciousness, a self-affirmation and awareness of the individual woman in the world. Intratextual semantic level. The general theme of the poem is the fortune of being a woman in the vital circumstance of the context of a mission. Three great sub-themes can be recognized at the semantic level: freedom, being, and the conquest of the feminine being, that are related to what is the main themes that indicates from the title and its closest at the end, which is the fortune of being a woman, the position of being a fortune in relation to the gender. That is the joy of living and being a woman with enjoyment of their abilities contained through the poet's approach and implicit resistance of the situation of being as a subject. Some aspects of the importance of being a woman are pointed out by Sheila Benaviv. To be oneself, as it appears in the work of the German philosopher Hegel, in the sense of being aware of oneself and it enters in the historical and concrete determinations. This first appeared in Hegelian philosophy as opposed to being in oneself, being with its determinations, but without self-awareness. Freedom. Simone de Beauvoir points out the importance of alterity in the different collectivities, not collectivities, or even defined as one if it does not in middle place the other in the front of oneself, reflects on the submission of the women and establishes the woman is determined and differentiated in relation to the man and not the man in relation to her. This is the inessential versus the essential. He is the subject, he is the absolute, she is the other. The fact of becoming the other for women has a double disadvantage. It is not only what is singled out by the negative opposition that is a subject and what is not him, but also she constitutes an object against what would be the male subject. There are two verbs preceded by the verb, the negation no, not to exist mutilated, not to enter or yes in church. The verb to exist is associated with positive elements, but accompanied by the metaphor mutilated, it suggests the connotations of limitation, of impediment. However, the adverb no transforms it into something positive. Judith Butler in Undoing the Gender refers to the subjugation and regulation of the subject that not only acts on their behavior, but the subject is transformed through the regulation. The innovation of the poem by use of the verbs in infinitive, which generates an assessment of them as qualities of the lyrical self, and in turn in recognition of women as subjects in themselves. The possibility of access to education and arts enable women to fully educate themselves and to prioritize their feminine essence. In this case, the mention of the other is not linked to a particular individual, but to a vital circumstance for which she feels grateful and fortunate not to live out of the obligation, but to carry out by choice, such as marriage. Her recognition as a female subject implies social advances of the historical moment. Freedom is here in relation to society, and the metaphors are associated with coercion, repression, and subjection, but different means. The metaphysical quality of being at night and to be in the day implies not only the assumption of herself as intellectual individual, but also her possibility of being a woman in relation to her gender, her assumption of femininity. Butler says that desire has been placed on the margins to achieve social contentment or disciplines, but there is a fundamental relationship between desire and agency that is a human action. She implicitly referred the conquest that previous generators had achieved. The negation is not associated with limitation, but with the possibility of obtaining more freedoms. When the poem refers to not being measured in goats, it's referred to what is still today, unfortunately, in some countries, is the sale of the girls in exchange for animals. That is a consideration of women as an object, obviously violating their human rights. As Nellie Richard raises, postmodern discourse is characterized by prioritizing the space and voices of so much minorities. That is why the female voice acquired importance precisely as soon as it begins to be considered and listened to. A process takes place where the center of the modern conceptions begins to be questioned, losing hierarchy, and throughout this translation, the importance of women arises among their historical displaced sectors. Richard said that feminine writing has the characteristic of being a writer, of being at the edge, and whenever it transgresses this established institutional masculine order, and the feminization of writing is generated that occurs to deregulate the thesis of the majority discourse. The poem ends with the exhortation to other women to discover themselves, discover by yourself another foreseen on the bridge of the gaze. On this case, the use of the infinitive implies the proposal of knowing oneself without the intermediation of the other, which is metaphorically alluded to by the breach of the gaze. It is the incentive to self-knowledge without negotiation throughout the other. Finally, the assertion of the constitution of being first a human is in recognition of the biological, imperfect and temporary, and then as a woman. It emphasizes being a woman in a metaphysical sense and reinforces gender equally with the final expression, neither more nor less, with all the semantic load that previous historical inequalities imply. In conclusion, there is a transperception in this part. There is a different treatment of women considering this text as a subject and not an object. The reader recognizes by transperception all the affirmation characteristics that the woman is a subject. The different posture of the lyrical self with respect to herself is significant in relation to a new perception of the female subject. This point alters the fact of symbolic process of woman as object, placing them in a position of subjects as being able to do relation to their rights. In fortune, we find a significant choice since it rises the independence of the female subject without being impregnated by the gaze of the other. It would be a construction of the female being without being traversed by the masculine other, but rather a person, a totally free configuration. In this sense, the poem names the quality that transform her into a being that is first a human and then a woman, prioritizing through language her own recognition with the female gender. A new point of view of what is to be a woman is found not in opposition to the other, but in a search for her feminine identity, accepting her physical and metaphysical essence. The consciousness that this poem purports is that of autonomy with respect to the other and discovery within without the intermediate of the other.